All right, and we are live. Loida, thank you so much for jumping on today to the Real Estate Homies podcast. Just before we hit record here, you said, "Wow, somebody wants to talk about cold calling," and like that is exactly what I want to do today. I think it's extremely valuable. So thank you for joining.
Yeah, thank you, Austin. I'm super excited to have this conversation and talk a little bit more about cold calling today.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think before we do that, I think it's important that everybody knows, honestly, just how much of a badass you are. So first off, you started publishing videos on YouTube in 2015. You do like new agent tips. I think something that's really cool you do is the live cold calling. So you show people what that experience looks
Yep.
like. You have like 240 to 250 videos on your YouTube channel, almost like 5,000 views and 80,000 subscribers. And it's amazing what you've been able to build since 2015. 7 years in the making of.
hmm
I'm sure a lot of work, a lot of thought, a
Yeah.
lot of effort has gone into that. um, let's kind of talk about that first. So
Okay.
let's shift into how you got into real estate, what brought you to the industry, and then what sparked that idea to go, I need to be on YouTube.
Yeah. So I started doing YouTube videos back in 2015. Prior to getting into real estate, I used to work in marketing and advertising, and
Mm.
I absolutely loved what I did. I was traveling, I was in concerts, events, automotive, everything. I loved what I was doing, but it got to a point that one of the last companies that I was working at, I was traveling 100% of the time, living out of a suitcase from hotel to hotel. And I remember specifically being at the Chicago Auto Show for right at that moment. I was a product specialist for vehicles. So I was doing the ride and drives, and it was negative 30 degrees outside. And I'm like, this is not the life I want to live for the rest of my life. So then I got back home. So I'm originally from Los Angeles, California. And then at that point, I was like, you know what? I don't want to be out on the road all the time. I want to transition to something else. I looked into getting my MBA, my master's.
Mm.
I went back to school for that. I got a corporate job in a cubicle and quickly realized that I hated it. So then that's kind of when I started to look into real estate. I knew that it was not going to be easy, that it was not glamorous, but I knew that if I did what the top producers had done in the past, I would have success. And it was just a matter of being disciplined and committed. So that's kind of when I made my transition. The reason that I started to publish videos on YouTube is because I remember being brand new, and I would go on YouTube to see what it was like to be a real estate agent, and I wasn't really finding anything. And what I was finding, the people that were putting out videos, they weren't really being consistent. So they were a video here, a video over there, and they were mostly men. I wasn't really finding any women. So then I took that as an opportunity for me to start creating videos. So it was just me posting what I was learning, my journey. And then when I saw the response, because I was being consistent, putting one video a week, I started to get feedback from others saying, this is exactly like what I'm going through. This is so cool that you're putting that stuff out there. And just like you mentioned, my very first cold call video that I posted was me cold calling a for sale by owner. And it's a horrible phone call. You guys can go and watch it, but it has like over 100,000 views. And the reason that I did it was because I was like, you know what? Someone's going to learn from my mistakes. And also, I want people to see that, we're all normal. You're not going to just make your first phone call and set an appointment. You're going to screw up. But fast forward, I think it was last year, or I don't know. I posted one of my latest for sale by owner cold calls, and you can totally see the difference in me and being able to talk to someone. So that's kind of why I stayed consistent with YouTube, and that's kind of where I am now.
I love that. And I think it kind of keeps you accountable, right? Like as you get consistent and you actually have people watching and viewing, and it makes you feel like, okay, I have to be there for them to help
Mhm.
them even more and more and more. So, all right, here's a big question. I think to tee it off is, what got you into cold calling? So like what sparked that? Because obviously, yes, YouTube and creating that helps you to
Yeah.
attract and to gain new following and to network and just build your honestly online network. But what made you decide, okay, cold calling's the route I'm going to go as an agent? Because so many other agents could do like door knocking, they may tap into their sphere immediately, but like you chose cold calling. So what was the reason for that?
So when I started with Brian, who's my partner. And the way that he got started was through cold calling and door knocking. And he had a lot of success with it. So initially, before I got into real estate, I was like, hey, like, do you need an assistant? And it was kind of like a joke. And he was like, look, this is not for everyone, but you can come and see what it is that I do. And when I ended up getting my license, I was like, okay, well, Brian did door knocking and cold calling. Like, that must be what we have to do. And then I used to watch a lot of Mike Ferry, and he's all about, go after the listings. So I was like, okay, the very first book that I read was How to Develop a Six-Figure Income by Mike Ferry. And he talks about the cold calling and the door knocking. So that's why I started doing it. And actually, my very first year, all I did was door knocking. So I got the
Wow.
door knocking and the cold calling out of the way, which I know is what a lot of agents hate to do. And they're probably never going to do, some of them. But for me, it allowed me to step outside of my comfort zone
Mhm.
and build thick skin, have a knowledge of how to communicate with so many different personalities and people. So essentially, it built me and my confidence so that once I started to make those phone calls, I wasn't scared. Like, if someone yelled at me, I wasn't going to hang up and go cry and not make any more calls. So I started making those cold calls because I knew, in fact, there were still people that were going to answer that still needed my help. I remember making that first phone call and I was scared to do it just like anybody else. But what I kept telling myself was that if I don't do it, somebody else is going to do it and they're going to get the listing. So why not me? Because it could be
Yep.
a potential commission of 10, 20, $30,000, and I don't want that.
Yep. Exactly. Exactly. So that you started cold calling. Did you get your license and start this in 2015?
Yes. So I got my license in May of 2015.
Got you. Okay, so you start immediately cold calling, door knocking, and YouTube videos.
Yeah.
And so now we're about 7 years down the road,
Mhm.
and a lot has changed. There's been a lot of technology advancements that have occurred with real estate. Things that allow you to do automation with text and emails, and something that hasn't been automated quite yet is phone calls. So my question is this, because I see it a lot with a lot of different tech companies that cold calling is dead, and I want to know your perspective. Is cold calling dead?
It's definitely not dead. I can tell you, recently, one of our team members went out door knocking. She got a buyer, solid qualified buyer for 1.6 million, got an escrow, $40,000 commission. It came from door knocking. There's a certain group of people that are still not tech savvy, that maybe they don't know how to text, maybe they're not in the social media platforms, that if you get them in person going door knocking or going cold calling, it's going to happen. With cold calling, it's so funny because I always get comments on my YouTube channel that people say, oh, well, you have to look a certain way in order to succeed in this business. And what I say is, like, look, when I call people, they have no idea what I look like. It's all about my skills and how I'm able to deliver, what I'm going to say, objection handlers, and whether or not they're going to feel comfortable in wanting to continue the conversation with me. Because
Hmm.
in reality, we just have those first couple of seconds in the beginning of the phone call in order for them to make a decision whether they're going to hang up on me or not. So the way that I was trained and the way that we train our agents, especially when it comes to cold calling, is that there's a lot of communication. You have to be very good with what you say, how you say it, your tonality, pattern interrupts. And that's what's really going to make you stand out on the phone versus anybody else. So
Love
cold
that.
calling, it's not dead. I still love to pick up the phone and call for sale by owners and expireds. Now, at this point, 7 years later, I don't do it every single day, but I'm not afraid of, picking up the phone and then just making a phone call, because for me, it's almost like a challenge. Like, I want to see if I can set this appointment. It's almost like a game, because
Yeah.
cold calling, it's probably not going to be fun for a lot of people, especially if you're on the phone 3, 4 hours a day, but you have to see, the end result. There's still people that are going to, need your help. And if you're not doing it, someone else is doing it.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So something you talked about there was pattern interrupts. What's a pattern interrupt?
So, for example, when you're calling a for sale by owner or an expired, whatever you say, usually every single agent will say the exact same thing. So a pattern interrupt would be, let's say, the expired says, "Oh, you're like the 20th agent that's calling me this morning." So something I would say, instead of saying like, "Oh, I'm sorry, blah blah blah," which is what a lot of agents say, is that I say, "Oh, are you sure I'm not like the 21st?" Or, "Oh, okay, so then you probably know what I'm going to ask you next, right?" Because they're not used to hearing that. They're used to hearing agents apologizing or going on with their scripts. So when I say something that throws them off, that they're not used to hearing, that is a pattern interrupt.
Gotcha. Yep. So would you say like scripts are big, right? They like, especially in the beginning, they help you get, they're like crutches, like in a
Yeah.
sense. But at what point do you believe it's actually okay to go off the script and just be authentic?
I think once you have your script memorized, the whole point of the scripts is to know what questions to ask so that you can be in control of the conversation. You never want to be on the other end where the homeowner or the potential lead is the one asking all of the questions and then you're just answering them. Because if you get into that point, if you say something that they don't like, then that's it. Like you're done.
Hmm.
So for scripts, for me, the way that I did it is that I learned the scripts, every single question. Then I started to incorporate my tonality and my personality. And then once I started to do that, it allows you to listen better as well. Because
Hmm.
people will tell you their entire life story or they'll vent to you for like 5 minutes about, how they hate agents, but they'll tell you everything that you need to know so that you can position yourself in a way so that they see that you're better than the last one.
I love that. I love that a lot. So, how big of a role has cold calling played in your real estate business? Like, has it been a big role for you? And like, I imagine now, like you've built up a sphere and you've built up a past client list to get referrals,
Yeah.
and repeat business. But how big of a role does cold calling play in your business?
Well, pretty much when I started, I built my business from cold calling expires and for sale by owners. I knew that I wanted to focus on listings, and those were the low hanging fruit. So I told myself, a lot of people are not good at making cold calls. They suck on the phone, they're monotone, they don't have a personality. So I need to role play like 10 times more than them so that when I do have a conversation with someone that has no clue who I am, I'm able to either make a decision whether I want to work with them, whether they're serious and motivated, and if they are, my goal is to set an appointment.
Mm.
So it's played a big role, definitely.
I love that. I love that. So, from cold calling, you've probably had a ton of experience of being in different CRMs, working the CRMs, making lists. How do you organize your CRM when you're making cold calls?
So
Do you
I've
have like a
always
process?
Yeah, so I have always had a dialer. I used to use Mojo a lot. As of recently, I switched to Batch Dialer because
Hmm.
it has different features. But for Mojo, which is what a lot of agents use, I created folders. So depending on the type of conversation that I ended up having, I would categorize people into certain folders. Also, the I'm with EXP Realty. We have KV Core, so I was able to sync Mojo to KV Core. So then everyone just goes into their correct categories, and that's kind of how I'm able to keep track of everyone. But also something that I do that I recommend for everyone to do, especially if you're cold calling, is that whenever I have a really good conversation with an expired for sale by owner or whoever it is, I confirm that the number that I'm calling is their cell phone number. And then what I proceed to do is that I'll send a recorded video message of me introducing myself. That has gotten me so many listing appointments in the past where these expireds tell me, you know what, Loida, call me in 2 months. That's when I'll be ready. I try to find out why 2 months in a sense. And then once we hang up, I send them a video message and then they tell me, you know what, I'm out of town. I'll be back at the end of next week. So let's just talk then. That
I love
happened
that.
to me. I ended up getting a listing from that just because, again, video is very powerful, especially if you combine it when you're making phone calls.
Yeah, and I think that's something that you just said that was really interesting was they said, "Hey, reach out again in 2 months," and you actually followed up with the response of, "Well, what's going on? Why wait? Why 2 months?"
Yeah,
So
exactly.
that's a one tactic right there that people could be doing that most of the time I think people be like, "Wait 2 months." They're like, "Okay, sounds good." And you're not
Yeah,
pushing. You're just asking, "Okay, yeah, no worries. Why are you waiting 2 months?" And it's just to
exactly.
hear their story a little bit more.
Mhm.
So what are some of your favorite lead sources when it comes to cold calling?
So I like to do the expireds and the for sale by owners. also circle prospecting, so the neighborhood zip codes, absentee owners as well. Those are pretty much my big ones right now. And because of all of the years that I've been in the business, I also like to just make phone calls and especially video messages to my sphere of influence and past clients.
I love that. I love it. So what are some type of videos you could do for your sphere of influence and past clients? Like if somebody wanted to just send something out today after watching this, and what's like one video you'd recommend they do?
If you haven't done it, send a video just reintroducing yourself. Maybe you have done business with that person in the past or not, but the moment that you close, pretty much a lot of these people, they forget about you. They're not thinking about real estate anymore. So what we like to do is that we like to keep in touch with people once a month at least. So you can switch it up. Video 1 month, text another month, and so forth. So if right now after this, something that you can do, and I'm going to tell you a little trick that I learned recently. If you have an iPhone and the other person has an iPhone, obviously the video quality is going to look perfect. But what ends up happening sometimes is that if you have an iPhone, the other person has an Android, it looks like super pixelated, like if it was a video from 1980 or something like that. So what you can do is Loom, the app, loom.com.
Mm,
You
I
can
use Loom
sign
all the
up.
time.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, you can download the app on your phone. I think it's like $10 a month, something cheap, or they even have a free version.
Yep.
Record the video on your phone and then text that person the link, because then the actual video is going to pop up on their text message feed and they can watch it from there. And I think
Mhm.
what's also cool is that Loom will notify you when someone watches the video that you sent. So that would be a great tip for you to implement. So a video introducing yourself, maybe a quick video on the changes that we're seeing in the market, the interest rates, like any news that right now a lot of people are talking about. You want to make a little clip that is not too much info that people are not going to reach out to you. It's almost like you want to tease them to find out more, and then they reach out to you with like, "Hey Austin, can you tell me a little bit more about interest rates, because I'm thinking about buying or something."
Yep, I love that. I love that. So, from a cold calling perspective, what are like some good tactics? Like if I were a new agent that doesn't have a large sphere and I've never cold called before, what are some tactics of ways that I can like pick up the phone and make this happen?
I would say role playing is key. I used to think that role playing was corny in the beginning. I would be
Yeah.
told, Loida, you have to role play. And I'm like, well, I know my scripts already. Like, why do I have to role play? But I noticed that once I started role playing, and I would role play every single day before I would make my calls. So my days, I would start at 8 o'clock calling the expireds, and I would call from like 8 until 11:30. But from 7 to 8 or 7:30 to 8, I would be role playing every single day expireds with agents that I had met at other conferences. Some of them I knew in person, some of them I have never seen them, or I have never even met them up to this day. But everyone had different personalities. So I was like, you know what? I need to practice. And what I started to see is that as I was role playing more, once I started to make my phone calls, I would come across the same scenarios that I would just role play. So as I'm talking to these homeowners, I have like a little swagger smile, because I'm like, I know exactly what I'm going to say next, and I know
Yep.
exactly how I'm going to set the appointment. So then that gave me the confidence to then pick up the phone again and continue making the phone calls.
Mhm.
So role playing is key, knowing what to say. So the scripts, again, the scripts in the beginning, it's almost like a guide for you to know what questions to ask. Because if
Mhm.
you don't ask the right questions, you might think that they're a lead, but they're really not a lead.
Yep.
So the scripts are really important. And then after that, it's like a part of the business. If you want to get deals, you're going to have to prospect, whether it's phone calls, door knocking, or whatever it is. So might as well learn through the phones, because again, that is also what allowed me to get better at my communication. And it got to the point that if someone yelled at me, if someone was pissed, I mean, there's been many times that people would call back my number like 50 times and text me like, go rot in hell. And I'm like, the fact that this person has that time to do that, it doesn't bother me anymore, because what
Yeah.
I'm looking for is I focus on that person that said, you know what, Loida, you called at the perfect time. I need to sell. I'm going to lose this house. And I'm like, well, great. When's a good time for us to get together? So those are
Yep.
the people that I'm focusing on. And it's very rare that someone is extreme that they call me back and spam call me and yell at me or call my broker. It's very rare for that to happen. So when I focus on the people that I need to help, that's kind of what I tell myself. There's people that need my help and I need to call them because I need to get to them before a shady agent does that's going to screw them over, which we hear all the
Yep.
time.
Yeah, I love that. Now, what my question is this, when it came to the beginning and you were making phone calls, like cold calling was like a majority of your day at one point, cold calling, door knocking, trying
Yeah.
to build up your business. So when you were in that time of life, how many calls were you making per day? Like how many dials?
It was, I want to say about 500.
Okay.
My
That's amazing.
goal,
And that's because the dialer, right? Like you weren't
yes, 'cause of
punching
that.
in. Yeah.
No, if it was that, oh no. But my goal was to talk to at least 30 people every single day. That's why I got a dialer. Because I knew the more people that I would talk to daily, the sooner I would get to that one person that, told me, okay, I want to buy or sell. And it was like an appointment. So I knew, again, from reading and watching all these top producers that have been doing it for years, that you have to talk to people. If you're not talking to people, like when you're new, they're not going to come after you and like blow up your phone, like, hey, Loida, I want to sell my house. They probably don't even know you're in the business.
Yep.
So that was my goal, to talk to as many people as I could. Many days I would talk to 10 people in 1 hour. Some days I would talk to one person in 1 hour. But
Hmm.
the way that I am personally, I hold myself to a certain standard. And if I commit if I say I'm going to do 30, I'm going to do 30. The most contacts that I ever made in one day was 70. And I started
Oh,
at 8
wow.
o'clock and I ended at 8:45 in the evening. And I was like, I
Wow.
need to hit that 70.
That's incredible. Yeah, 70 people in one day. I mean, even if those are some of those combos may be short, right? So when you're saying 30 people you're in contact, you're talking about they answered the phone, or are you talking about they answered the phone and had a 10-minute conversation with you?
The second. So they answered the phone. They were either the homeowner or a decision maker. And they knew, I asked them the question if they were thinking about buying or selling. So it was an actual conversation. It was not, they picked up, hey, wrong number. Like, I don't count that.
Got you. So you
And
count
I'll
it
tell
as
you
like they.
this. Yeah, I'll tell you this. The last person that I talked to, I set an appointment with, and I was
Oh,
brand new
wait, on that day of 70?
on that day. Yes.
So, all right. So your goal is to set an appointment. Were you trying to set listing appointments at this time, or were you trying to set just any kind of appointment for buying or?
Well, I was calling expireds.
Okay,
So
got you.
so listing appointments. From there, I did get people that told me that they wanted to buy, but no, I'm counting listings. I want to set listing appointments.
I love that. I love that. So, two things. Scripts. Where's a good place if I'm an agent that's like, all right, I'm ready to do this. I'm investing in online leads. I'm investing in different lead sources and third party data to get expireds. Where should I get my script if I don't have one? Do I need to make it myself? Is there somewhere I can go to get one? What do you recommend for scripts?
For scripts, I feel that nowadays you can even just go on Google or watch, Mike Ferry has his website. I think he has them for free. There's Mike Ferry, Kevin Ward, Tom Ferry, whatever it is, there's a lot of free scripts out there.
Mhm.
Every script is going to be different depending also on your personality. Because what I notice is that the Mike Ferry scripts, I follow those, but then I make them my own.
Mhm.
So I know that he says, for example, sign right here on the contract. So I reworded it to, let's get the ball rolling. Here's a pen. Because
Yep.
it's softer for me. That's like my personality. So I would say for any agent, look for some scripts, look through them to see which one is the one that you like best, and then stick to it. Because what I see happening all the time is like, oh, I'm going to take a piece from over here and a piece from over there. And then you still don't know your scripts. And then you get all confused. And then you think the scripts don't work. But in reality, you're just not sticking to one and like mastering it.
Gotcha. So then here's my second question, and I don't know if this is the sauce and you don't want to give it away, but where do you get your expired leads?
So the expireds from Vulcan 7, that's the
Vocus
source
7.
that yeah. When I started, I would get them from Redx, then ended up switching. For me at that time, Redx gave me a lot of bad numbers and fax machines. So Vulcan 7 is pretty much the source that I've been getting the expireds and for sale by owner stuff.
Love that. Love that. Well, this has been fun. I've enjoyed this. I hope you have as well. If an agent were wanting to try to get in contact with you, because obviously you got a ton of knowledge when it comes to cold calling, door knocking, and just the business in general, marketing, everything. Like you kill it online, you kill it on the phones. How can they get in contact with you? What's the best way for them to ask you questions and just stir up combo with you?
Yeah, so you guys can just send me a DM on Instagram. I think I put it here, Loida Velas. You can also go on my YouTube channel or Facebook or my website, loidavelasquez.com.
Love that. Love that. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for the time and doing this today for us, Lloyd. It was very fun, and I hope you enjoyed it.
Yes, thanks, Austin.